How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. I'm in Atlanta. I finish in a week, which is very exciting. Yeah, it'll be my last day on Loki, the day our second episode airs. So just very busy getting it ready for television, basically. So, yeah.
I was gonna say, I think a lot of people don't realize you're probably still doing final VFX on episode.
Yep. Yeah, we're still doing like sound mix, VFX, music. We're kind of getting everything ready on episode 6 at the moment. And then, yeah, and then I'm finished. It's so surreal. It's really nice seeing it go out into the world. But obviously it's been my life for 2 years. So you normally kind of get this like mourning period whenever you finish something to be like, oh, I wonder, but I don't have time. I used to like, now it's just out there. So yeah, so it's fun. It's been quite a ride.
I have a ton of questions for you. First, I want to start with congratulations. First 2 episodes are fantastic. Cannot wait to see the rest of it. But I am curious, how much free will do you think people have in the MCU? And how much is it sort of the timekeepers just saying, this is what you're going to be doing?
Well, I would say that, everything is dictated by the timekeepers. So, that's kind of the discussion within our show, right? Like, Mobius and Loki have that conversation. Like, I love that line that Loki has where he's like, so really we're the only ones with free will at the TVA because, they're working for the timekeepers, but everybody else, like, on Earth, as far as they're aware, they think they're living on that free will, but really they're not. They're on a set path because if they venture off it, the TVA are going to come. So, yeah.
Completely. How old do you think Mobius is? I know that the TVA moves in different speeds, whatever, but do you think there's like an age if you were to quantify it in human years?
So I think he must be quite a few hundred years old, but maybe not as old as so this is the way to explain it, because obviously the TVA is outside of space and time, right? So I think he must be very hundreds and hundreds of years old because time doesn't affect him in the same way as it would have if he was on Earth. But my theory is, and this is not like, this is just me guessing, I think I'm just trying to work it out really, because I feel like I think quite a few hundred years old would be my guess, because him and Renslayer had this really beautiful, deep friendship. And like, I think everyone at the TVA is like, arguably they're all from the beginning of time because the timekeepers brought them into existence. So I think it's sort of almost unknowable for us to, I'm so bad at maths. I think it's almost unknowable for us to work out how old he possibly could be. So it must be more than hundreds, actually.
So the first episode's 50 minutes, second episode's 53. Are the rest of the episodes similar in length?
Yeah, they kind of vary. I think we basically kind of did what was best for the story, but they're all kind of around that ballpark, I would say, more or less.
Sure. I'm curious how it works, though, with deleted scenes in a series like this. Do you actually end up with a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor? And if so, is there any thought process about how fans will eventually see it?
Sure. I think it's like everything, right? There definitely are scenes across the show that we didn't end up putting in there just because once you're in the edit, right? Like when you're cutting, sometimes there'll be a scene where you're like, oh, actually, this is actually slowing the story down and not pushing us forwards, or it, sounds like tonally it doesn't quite sit right. So I think that's just the nature of filmmaking. So in terms of the fans seeing any, I guess that would probably be more in Marvel's hands, what they would want to release from the cutting room floor. But yeah, we definitely have moments that, we've shifted and changed, but just in the nature of filmmaking, really.
There's a cool shot of Tom and Owen walking, I think it's episode 1, when they look out over the city. And, that city is a big establishing shot for the TVA and this entire society. Can you sort of talk about the debate on what that shot was going to look like and putting that shot together?
Yeah, so I had a lot of fun actually, like with the team, like coming up with the idea of the TVA, because it's like, I would say that city shot is really inspired by the comics, right? Where they have the rows of desks that stretch out into infinity. And that's definitely something I know me and my production designer took a lot of inspiration from. And you can see that across other spaces in the TVA, the idea of this infinite amount. But along with that, I think the real challenge was, okay, so we're setting up somewhere that exists outside of time and space, and there's no sun, and it's not really in a space. So it was kind of a way to show that in a way that people could, wrap their head around. So I think that's shot there. It's almost like a an office that is a city, really. So it was kind of explaining that, but having it stretch off into infinity. I mean, I always think about it in a weird way, almost a bit like Las Vegas. Like, you know, they don't take many breaks in the TVA. I think we have one poster in episode 2 that says they get a 17-minute lunch break, but we don't get the impression that any of these people sleep, you know, because they don't need to. Like I said, like time is very different within the TVA, so they're always working. Hence why Mobius's exact age would be unknowable, because how could we know? It's from whenever the timekeepers, you know, began the TVA. So yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
Like, 100%. Yeah. I'm always curious, like all Marvel fans, about Easter eggs. Are there any specific scenes in the first 2 episodes that you would advise fans to hit pause on?
Ooh, just trying to honestly, I would say like these are more just fun details, but the drink that Mobius is drinking in the time theater scene is like a drink that's not around anymore, and we've got a lot of fun stuff like that across the TVA, like stuff that doesn't necessarily exist within, you know, our time now on Earth. Like, but you know, the TVA can get that kind of stuff, which I think is fun. I also have a few references to Marvel across it. Like there's a shot that's an homage to Iron Man, which I think any fan of Iron Man will probably spot quite quickly. So yeah, those are the kind of things, but I wouldn't want to lead the witness too much, because I just think it's fun to kind of spot that stuff, right? So yeah.
Completely. What was it like, actually? The thing that I think, one of the things that I love about the series the most is that you're exploring a new part of the MCU, something that's never come before. And so what is it like as a director establishing the rules and regulations, if you will, of this new organization, and how much freedom do you have versus someone overseeing you at Marvel saying, oh, we got to be careful with this?
Honestly, I think I've never felt like with Marvel, it was always whatever's best for story, then we'll work it out. And I think the really fun thing for us as a team in creating the TVA was just, I mean, for me, like I've worked in a lot of offices. It took me a long time to get my first directing gig. And I think something for me was like, well, I want this to feel like a real living, breathing office. If these guys like never stop working, there should be a coffee pot that looks like it hasn't been changed for far too long. And there should be posters telling you to keep your desk tidy, and just the messiness and the realness of the place. Like I was really keen to explore that. And alongside that, I think the fun of it was like I was really inspired by like brutalist architecture, because where I grew up in Southeast London, like I grew up near where they filmed A Clockwork Orange and Children of Men, and I love the use of that. And obviously Blade Runner uses a lot of architecture like that, and I was excited by seeing that in the MCU, but mixing that with this kind of Midwest, you know, very classy style, because, you know, the TVA are very heroic, and the idea of melding those together was really exciting to me, along with like I guess like the retro futuristic technology. Like I was really excited in like working with Russell Bobbitt on who's our prop master, like working on like the weapon design and how the computers would look with Kazra, my production designer. And I think something that was exciting to me was just kind of pulling from all these different areas of sci-fi. Like I kind of wanted the show to almost be like a big love letter to sci-fi. Like our time doors are inspired by Dune, for example, but we also have like the font on the computers was inspired by Alien. And so we were kind of, you know, we were pulling from everywhere. But I think with all those sci-fi references and the overall style reference, it was also just always about giving it a groundedness, and always the emotion is what would ground us in the, you know, the circumstances we were in. So like, for example, as you see when Loki's first brought in by the TVA, we really wanted that. I mean, for me, I wanted that to represent what it feels like going through the airport, you know, and like having to go through all the security changes and like all the weird queues you have to go in, or I guess in America, the DMV. So I think it was always trying to bring like bits of reality that the audience would recognize, but putting that into a fantastical setting.
I have to stop there. I just want to say thank you so much for giving me your time. A million other questions for another day. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Cheers.